Well, we are back. Thank you to everyone who has joined us. I'd like to have a quick reminder before we jump to our last but certainly not least session of the crescendo, the live event in Houston that will be happening on the 4th and the 5th of October. Please do visit the Energy Capital and Power website for more information to register. If you think that this is good, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We've got an amazing lineup of speakers at the same caliber that we have speakers right now. So please do go to the website. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our next session. Amazing. So our next question is us basically speaking about Africa's place in the future global energy sector and continental transformation. I'd love to warmly introduce Ms. Sheila Hollis, the Acting Executive Director for the United States Energy Association, who will be our moderator for the event. Sheila, thank you so much. Please do keep an eye on the chat box as I'll be communicating with you there. Audience, please do use the live Q&A. Take it away, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, and thank you for organizing that extraordinary, magnificent first panel, which really hit on a number of the issues which are inescapable, regardless of what panel you're on. I think they really hit home with the issues that are confronting not just Africa, but in the United States and worldwide. What are really the gut issues, and what can we do to help to improve, make things better, et cetera, and still be a player in the financial arena and the rest of the arenas that you need to do. I was struck by one factor, and that is that we are in the middle of the ESG period in our history, environment, social, and other issues which have tremendously impacted the financial community's perception of appropriate use of energy, appropriate forms of energy, and so on. So hopefully we can get into that a little bit. We have a truly outstanding, truly amazing panel. And I see, I am looking here for Mr. Chisenda, who I'm not seeing yet on our list of people that are up on the screen yet, but let me go first to introduce this outstanding panel. I'd like to introduce Derek Campbell, and you can see the remarkable backgrounds of the players on the panel, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Ken McGhee, Jacob Levine, pleasure to have you, Jacob. And Mr. Ayuk, and we are looking forward so much to hearing from you on this extremely difficult, complicated, but fascinating issue. What role is Africa going to play in the global energy transition, and how can we help in African resource development to enable a U.S. energy transmission? It's sort of a symbiotic relationship between the U.S. and Africa. Having had the privilege of working extensively in Africa, it is near and dear to my heart, and seeing some of the issues that were set forth in the prior commentary from both the minister, from Equatorial Guinea, but beyond. There's nothing like being there and seeing what it's like to see energy poverty, to make one focus on the reality of circumstances of people in different parts of the world. And when you see that and you get the picture, it takes you look at things in a whole new, different way. Just a moment about United States Energy Association. We're not-for-profit, non-lobbying, non-partisan. We don't do any of that. We really have two basic pillars. The first pillar is to present information through convening various players, representative of the entire energy industry and those who are involved in it, both from the government and from not-for-profits, from consulting firms and so on. And then also working closely with USAID, the State Department, and the Energy Department in bringing energy to the world, improving the way it's delivered, and helping basically hand in hand with the U.S. government. So it's a unique organization in that respect. in that we do fulfill these two responsibilities. The first is the convening one, and then the second one, and sharing of information across the board, cybersecurity, developments in energy technology, and so on. Very high tech, and all the way down to the realities of the traditional production of oil and gas, coal, and other forms of energy, hydro, nuclear, etc. So we are about as apolitical as you can get. We work through a variety of administrations. We're coming up almost on a century of our existence from 1924. And post the fall of the wall, we have moved very, very extensively into this whole other world starting in the early 90s throughout the world in aiding in the development and improvement and assistance in the energy development around the world. So we have a small staff. We have about 104 countries at issue. We do very extensive work in Africa. Many of our people have spent many years in country, and they're most eager. In fact, they're on their way back to Africa in the past week or so. So we're very active in Africa and feel very passionately about our commitment to Africa in concert with the U.S. governmental agencies that we work with. So with that, we're going to be talking about some of the most difficult issues. How do we walk between the world of wanting to promote energy, develop energy in a reasonable, compassionate, good for all the people kind of way, and how do we also walk between the world of the ESG world? How do we get there? How can we encourage investment across the board in energy and improvement in energy, the way it's delivered, the way the people have access to it, and so on in Africa? Its affordability, its safety, its reliability, and particularly as the world is evolving in a very powerful direction in the need for energy, the development of Africa, the growth in Africa, and the wonderful nature of Africa in and of itself. So with that, let me ask, what role should Africa play in the global energy transition? That's the big one. So I am going to start with Derek. Why don't you lead off? Why don't you take us where we're going to go? And let's kick it off.
You got it. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Energy Capital and Power team. Also, folks at the African Energy Chamber. Some of you know me, you know my company, Energy and Natural Resource Security. You know our other platform, Alpha Sierra. So you know how involved we are or I am and my teams are in this whole narrative about energy in Africa. And one of the things I'm sure you guys talked about in the previous panel, Sheila, was this whole thing about energy poverty in Africa. The U.S. is what I think a major catalyst player in changing that narrative, right? For me, this is about U.S. hegemony in Africa. You have a situation where 80 to 100 million citizens in the United States genetically hail from Africa, but we as a country are in a hegemonic battle to have a pole position on the continent with the likes of China and Russia, who don't have any genetic or historical ties to the continent. So unacceptable. So now when we have this thing about an energy transition, we have a situation where African countries are becoming more and more industrialized. They're now well positioned to optimize and monetize their natural resource assets. It is my belief that the United States needs to come in, not from an aid-based, government-based perspective, but from a commercial perspective, where you can bring in small to medium-sized U.S. companies, partnering with African companies throughout the continent to help them optimize and monetize their hydrocarbon resources and their strategic minerals. Why is that important? It is not just about creating jobs and both in Africa and in North America. It is really about also helping industrialize the continent to make the players who are on that continent, the countries in that continent who are real players who have their act together, really come into the OECD type of world. So this thing about energy and how to use energy safely, those are great narratives, but the real narrative is about making sure that the continent isn't left in the third world. And it is important and imperative that the United States change its viewpoint about Africa, understand that there's a hegemonic battle about natural resources going on globally that we're losing with their near peer actors, and that the Africans whether they are from South Africa to Libya, from Angola, Nigeria to Kenya, Uganda. Those are our partners on that continent, and we need to be bringing best practices from a technological standpoint, from a security standpoint, and then from a what I call best optimized business practice standpoint to bear on behalf of the Africans and partner with them. And I want to reemphasize that last point. It is really, I think all African countries, all 54 of them, have said enough of the aid and the aid paradigm. That is not what they want to engage in. They want to engage, as with the U.S. at least, as partners who have resources that can be properly exploited, so that they can make money to create jobs and opportunity in their countries. And so if we make sure that the narrative has some of those subtexts that I just talked about, those thematics, and that really where there's no kidding, real partnership at play, then I think we'll be able to move the ball on the narrative writ large.
Thank you, Derek. And that leads me to put up the slide poll questions, which I'm hoping that Alyssa, you can do for me. That is, can you do that? The slide poll question. How long will it take? How long will it take? There we go.
So let us give each audience member perhaps 1 minute each. But before I read the poll questions, I would like to encourage all the speakers that are not speaking to kindly put themselves on mute. Thank you very, very much. So the first question is, how long would it take for African governments to achieve low carbon economy? Is it 1, 10 years? Is it 2, 10 to 20 years? Or is it 3, 20 years? So I'll give everyone just a few seconds to answer that. Thank you so much. May my team please pop up the second question? Just giving everyone some time. Fantastic. Potential clean energy value chain. Now, this is the second question. Which sector within the African clean energy value chain holds the most potential for US involvement? Is it 1, small-scale renewables? Is it 2, energy storage? Or is it 3, zero carbon technologies? So if you can choose either one of the options, we'll give you a few seconds to answer that as well. I'm also participating. All right. Thank you so much, team. If we can just pop up the last one before we carry on, Sheila. Thank you so much, team. Best answer for electrification. So this question goes, which clean energy solution can best answer Africa's call for electrification? Is it 1, mini and off-grid renewables? Is it 2, gas to power? Or is it 3, hydrogen production? All right. So while the audience is answering that, Sheila, you may continue with answering the questions for the panelists. Thank you so much.
Great, so much. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And I must say that Alyssa has been a tremendous pleasure to work with and very kind in many ways. The next quick introduction we would like to hear from is Jacob. Please, could you give us what you're up to, Jake, and your perception? This is a very quick intro, and we'll get into the depth later.
Sure. Thanks, Sheila. And thank you so much, Yulisa, for including the Development Finance Corporation, Ken and Colonel Campbell. It's great to join you both as well. We here at DFC are, first of all, as you can see, we're in the office, which is new. We're partially still remote, but I've joined from our office here on New York Avenue in Washington, D.C. today, so I apologize. There's a little commotion outside. We have made a tremendous commitment both to financing the energy transition in Africa and also to investing in climate-linked and clean energy projects. I am excited to share more about what that means, what our commitment to achieving net zero by 2040 looks like, what it will look like for us to be investing a third of our overall resources in climate-linked projects, and also some of the work that we're going to be doing in adaptation and resilience and technical assistance. I want to just note that in the first question, there was one option that was missing. How long will it take for African countries to reach a low carbon economy? I was wondering where the response to 0 years, because we all know that there are a tremendous number of economies on the African continent that effectively do not contribute to the carbon problem. And so in many ways, the continent has already reached some degree of net zero emissions. Obviously, there are other major emitting economies as well, but just wanted to recognize that as a matter of historical emissions, Africa is far ahead of the game. I'm looking forward to contributing some more with more specific questions, Sheila. And I'm just going to close my door.
Thanks so much, Jake. And let me say that all the bios are so impressive. I'm going to ask you to read them when you have a moment or in preparation for the further Q&A. But there's not enough time to really read everybody's bio off in detail, but they are outstanding, and there's a reason they're here at the table. They're brilliantly selected, and my hat goes off to Yolissa and her colleagues. Can we hear from you, Ken McGhee? And he's director of Africa Ubiquity Group.
Hi, good morning, Sheila, Derek, Jacob, everyone. I should say good afternoon or good evening to our folks on the continent. Boy, I feel like I have so much to say. I'll try to be really brief in the introduction. I come to all of this from a background of working on the continent. I've spent years working with oil companies as either the corporate social responsibility manager or the environmental social governance ESG manager. So I just want to bring that perspective into the game. I hope everyone got to see the first hour and hear NJ's great welcome, and especially the words from the Minister of Equatorial Guinea, my good friend, Minister Gabriel. He set the stage why we're here. We're here to alleviate energy poverty and figure out how the US and Africa can make that happen. So I look forward to the discussion. I think it's all about exchanges of ideas and people and actually doing projects on the ground. And I think that there's a wonderful group and synergy around this conference to do just that. People bring different perspectives and different ideas. We have US government, private sector, but the key is, as someone said earlier, boots on the ground and actually going to the continent to do the work that is well received, ready, and waiting for us to participate in. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you so much, Ken. Let us talk about where we are and how we can get where we can go. How can the United States help Africa? How can we deal with the difficulties that are encountering not just Africa, but in the world in this very difficult transition to the future energy world? And so just let's talk a little bit about Africa in the global context. And how is Africa playing in that global context? Where are we going? What are we doing? And what strategies should we be following in order to aid Africa in that in becoming even more successful in the global context, taking into account the difficult issues that obviously confront internal in Africa, but the world as a whole, and the CO2, the competition from other parts of the world, and so on. So why don't we open up then with why don't we ask Derek to kick that off, and let's take it from there.
Here's what I would say to you, Sheila, that Africa has a lot to offer globally to the world's energy transition, both matrix, both also policy development, right? So you look at Africa as a hydrocarbon producer, as a strategic minerals producer, what they need, and I would love to just extract the term aid out of any further conversation about Africa, because I think what the issue for Africa is partnership, and I'll elaborate on that more. But I think Africa has both a primary strategic and primary role to play continent-wide with the rest of the globe as a player who is both a producer, an originator of both energy feedstock, energy solutions to help power the world. I think what Africa needs is partnerships with technology partners, with banking partners who don't squeeze African projects from a financial risk perspective because they don't know how to manage any of the other risks, and give the energy projects an opportunity to mature so that they can be of use both externally to Africa and African countries, but also internally to Africa as a continent and African countries, both on a country by country basis, but also on a regional basis throughout certain parts of the continent. If you look at, I'm sure NJ has mentioned this to all of you before, this narrative about ESG and, hey, keep your hydrocarbons in the ground, they're bad for the world. Wrong story to articulate to Africans, and it's candidly colonial and unfair. And so I hope the US recognizes that and says, hey, you know what? We are going to give US companies an opportunity to partner with African nations and African companies to responsibly extract hydrocarbon resources, to responsibly extract strategic minerals, critical metals, and rare earths, so that the continent can be not a sideshow player in this global discussion about energy transition, but they can drive the narrative. Because if you have the ability to produce, you can also impact the policy surrounding the production and ultimate utilization of those assets. And so I think thematically, our engagement with Africa needs to be one of partnership so that we can drive really good, really productive, optimized, and well monetized extraction plays throughout the continent, and that partnership with the U.S. can be one that impacts small to medium-sized enterprises in the U.S., and that we really give the Africans the floor to drive the narrative behind all the policies that exist behind ESG, energy transition, and also candidly drive the entire story behind the destruction of energy poverty on that continent.
Thank you. And for Ken, question: how would you approach the cleaner energy? How should the approach to cleaner energy resources differ between developed and emerging markets? I mean, talk is cheap, and there's an old Irish expression say, "Hand out the wee tickets. We're going to do this and we're going to do that." But it's very different when you're in a developing world as opposed to a developed world. So would you give us your thoughts on that, Ken? Just because I know you're close to it.
Sure. And I'm sort of chopping at the bit because it gives me a chance to sort of follow on to what Derek was saying. I'm not ready to totally dispense with aid. I don't know if I'd call it that. Maybe it's developmental assistance, but I think trade and a smart targeted approach to working with communities is key. One of the things you see, and the minister laid it out so clearly in Equatorial Guinea when he was asked about African success stories, is what he has done. He has engineered not only developing people, but projects through the monies that's come from the extractive industry. So what you find is a strong local content environment. You find that Equatorial Guineans are working in all aspects of the oil and gas sector. And that should apply to the clean energy sector as well. The initial question about how can Africa be a part of this whole clean energy transition, I would say Africa should fuel it the same way it is developed in the extractive industries. I've been a part of so many projects where oil company will be investing funds through a Ministry of Mines or hydrocarbons, such as Gabriel's in Equatorial Guinea or in Ghana, or Minister Bruno in Congo. And those funds are then used to not only develop capacities, develop skills, but actually to do initiatives that further serve the extractive industry to meet their objectives for environmental stewardship, to meet their objectives for training, youth employment, women and gender equity. So you can't look at this in isolation. And I do really appreciate Derek's perspective and my dear friend NJ's perspective. But my perspective on this is there are still civil societies and communities that can be the backbone of Africa's recovery, not recovery, but Africa's resurgence, which will really be a part of some incredible energy transition in the United States. And the last thing I'll say on this is, I think the Biden-Harris administration plays a big role here. There's a big open door, there's key people in key positions, and I think that groups like this should be part of the voices that are speaking to them to encourage them to get official, unofficial, and all types of boots on the ground in Africa, exchange cultural, educational, from HBCUs and other universities to actually do the work. The welcome mat is so large for us on the continent, and Africa is not a country. It's 54, maybe 55 countries to do and receive this great opportunity. And I just think that this conference is just kicking it off in such a way that we have to let that momentum, not lose that momentum.
And the diversity, I think that the diversity that we have in the United States too, plays well. I mean, it's a natural. We have a diverse population in the U.S. and I think that is a huge opportunity. We're all kinds of people. We're from all kinds of backgrounds, and also the magnitude of the country and the fact that it's so different from state to state, from population to population, and also we're a resource-based economy. So I think that what you're hitting on is exactly right. You know, there's a huge opportunity, and Jake, I know you're at the forefront of this too. I'd be thrilled to hear your thoughts on it. To me, it seems like it's such a natural. I mean, we've been there, but maybe it's time to just play stronger on the fact that we have many attributes that tie very well into Africa.
Yes, 100%. And let me just say, you know, couldn't agree more with Ken's view that there's a tremendous opportunity here for the US government to lead the way, for the Biden-Harris administration to lead the way in terms of helping Africa to really drive this clean energy transition. I agree that Africa's place in the clean energy transition is to drive it. We believe and we know, based on the transactions that we're seeing in the market and the transactions that we're a part of, that there's huge demand for clean energy projects, whether you're talking about traditional renewables like solar and wind, or projects in battery storage and long duration energy storage that can help provide grid reliability, stability, dispatchable power, or, you know, all the way to geothermal energy, baseload, zero carbon emissions power, and then along other verticals within the clean energy ecosystem. You know, take a look at the transformation that is now happening in the transportation industry, where you've got electrification of all kinds of transport. We invested in a fund recently that just closed a transaction investing in zero emissions public transit buses. These are buses that are essentially going to replace diesel engines. And the climate and clean air implications cannot be overstated. You're going to move from loud, polluting diesel buses, which are sort of the backbone of public transportation throughout Africa, and also, by the way, throughout most of the world, and move towards zero emitting clean energy buses that can also provide a grid resource in terms of energy storage assets and reliability on the grid. So there is sort of an endless array of opportunities. We want to be a huge part of that. I want to just talk briefly about some of the ways that we think that we can be a part of that. First of all, DFC itself was established in 2018 legislation called the Build Act, which actually doubles our investment authority. So right now, the agency has roughly $31 billion of assets under management, and we're going to go up to 60. As a commitment to the Biden-Harris administration's focus on climate, we are going to invest a third of that entire portfolio in climate-linked projects. And those will range from the types of projects that I mentioned in the power sector and in transportation, also to sort of core infrastructure projects when we're talking about trade and logistics and shipping There are tremendous opportunities to be decarbonizing those activities, all the way to agriculture, resilience, and adaptation. And really importantly, even though DFC has historically focused on debt and project finance, we now have the authorities to do equity investments, to invest in funds, and to make technical assistance grants that we know are critical for the types of projects that are underway in riskier markets, because a lot of times you need the feasibility study or you need a tech de-risking financial facility in order to bring other investors off the sidelines and to help crowd in additional financing into the types of projects and transactions that we look at. I do just want to note on the discussion, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Sheila, around sort of this question of the energy transition. This is a really hard question for us as we look at not just Africa, but our entire global portfolio, because we are so focused on development and access to energy, but we're also extremely concerned about some of the science and emerging scientific consensus that is apparent on climate change. The IEA, which, as you all know, is not historically sort of a climate-focused agency, has recently come out with a report which tells us that in order to reach a global climate goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to stop financing all fossil fuel projects. That includes natural gas. Yesterday, their report came out. They said by today, we need to stop doing that financing. Now, DFC recognizes that in certain circumstances, natural gas may very well be the best sort of lower carbon option to provide access to electricity. And we're going to do projects where, from a development perspective, we can make a really meaningful impact in the quality of people's lives and the economic development of communities. For example, we recently received authority to proceed with a relatively small natural gas fired power plant in Sierra Leone. This project, which is I think 87 megawatts, is going to provide enough electricity to create capacity that could provide for up to 25% of the entire grid. So when you're talking about access to electricity, it has a massive, massive impact. But according to the IEA report, that breaks the bank in terms of carbon budgets. So we're trying very hard to balance and to really invest in the type of transition that can help us to answer basically the question of not what type of electricity or what type of transportation fuel are we investing in, but how are we providing electricity? How are we providing fuels for transportation in a way that is economically and commercially viable, competitive, and can help achieve our economic development and sort of access and poverty alleviation goals all at once. And we're encouraged that in the market today, you would be hard pressed to find a thermal power project, for example, that is able to outcompete renewables in most markets that we're looking at. So I don't want to hog the mic, but I'd be happy to dig into this question more and explain a bit more about the administration's approach, because I do think it represents a shift in policy from the last administration. But I know it's a difficult question, and we're eager to work together with everybody here in this group to help navigate a thoughtful path forward.
It's extremely difficult because certainly with respect to Africa, you could say the same of other parts of the world, but particularly Africa, the resources are there. They're not an unknown technology. It's what's right there in front of you. And it's very difficult to say, sorry, you can't develop that because we're worried about CO2. So we're going to work on building a gigantic solar facility here, and then we'll get the transmission up and everything we find. But it's very difficult to convince people who are sitting on top of resources which are understandable, can be used, and they can be cleaned up. There's no doubt that there are many steps in safety with respect to the monitoring and all the rest to reduce the CO2 emissions, but it's very difficult to make that shift, certainly in Africa where the needs are so great. I think just seeing energy poverty up close and personal is enough to get your attention. You say, you know, it's really hard to tell them there's enough natural gas here to fuel the entire country. You just need to build the infrastructure, which is not a magical technology. I mean, it has to be done professionally and appropriately and in an environmentally aware and sensitive way. You have to train people and so on and so forth. But it's there. They know it's there. It's been explored, and in fact, it may be that other countries may be more than willing to come in and take that project on and export it for their own needs, as well as serving the country in which it's located. So it's very difficult tightrope that we're walking. So I'd be interested, Ken, why don't you respond to that?
Well, I just wanted to add one thing, because I think we're getting into a situation here that might overlook something. You know, I think it may not be as difficult as we're imagining, for the simple fact that each country has its own history with development projects. And there's such a, one of the people in the comment box said, there's a tabula rasa, there's such an open slate, such a willingness to try new things, to try new approaches to energy, to energizing communities, to greener approaches, that I think with the right kind of investment, the right kind of exchanges from the US side, Jacob and your group and others in the administration, and targeting smaller projects, medium and small size enterprises to do some of this work is a really good way to start. And you'll find that the youth and the emerging, entrepreneurial class in most of the countries across Africa will take this challenge up. And that's what we found in developing SMEs for getting contracts in the oil and gas business. I think it'd be much the same in this sector.
Yeah. I think also that there's infrastructure can be filled in the sense that just the huge amount of hydro, the need for more transmission, better transmission, solid transmission, to move existing hydro and also develop hydro where it's appropriate. And understand there's nothing easy about developing a major hydro project either. It could take 10, 15 years, and that's true in the United States as well. I mean, it's very hard to get any major hydro. In fact, it's pretty much done here, but certainly in Africa, it is likely to have to be funded by international sources outside of Africa, maybe not, but to get that done is no small challenge. But there's plenty that's non-extractive, and one of the very fine questions that is in my panel here is that it's more than oil and gas. I couldn't say it more. It's more than oil, gas, coal in Africa. The opportunities for development are so staggeringly huge, and the people are so ready to work that it's a combination that it ought to be able to be done. So, Derek, you've been quiet. Why don't you chip in for a minute?
Yeah, I want to talk at the strategic level about this concept about it's very difficult, challenging situation for Africa. I would tell you it is, because it is difficult for any African nation to digest from an OECD nation or group of nations to say, hey, CO2 emissions in the world are getting uncontrollable. If you look at Africa as a CO2 emissions continent, they have very little to do with that. And so all of a sudden, the Europeans, the North Americans, and others, and Asians are saying, hey, hold on a second, we got a CO2 problem. Don't develop your natural resources. And those countries have had a 100-year head start on developing their own natural resources, developing their own industries. And now you want the Africans to delay and wait. Unacceptable. So the policy and the narrative needs to change. And so back to what Jacob said, about technologies that are good. Ken has said this from an ESG perspective, that there are policies that we can implement. There are ways for this not to be so difficult. One is the Africans have years of experience in developing their assets. They know where their assets, where the assets lie. Let's listen to them. Let's partner with them so we can go through an exploitation campaign that meets the requirements of ESG, that meet the requirements of good best practice in business, but also gives a platform, as you just said, Sheila, for small to medium-sized enterprises, both in the United States and other places, to go partner with the Africans to do proper exploitation of their natural resources. Why? Because not creating good baseload power, you can't create industry. One of the things that I know has not been talked about is small-scale modular reactors. Africa is a perfect place for nuclear power, right? And I think there's been the IFNEC folks. There are about 13 countries that belong to IFNEC, the International Federation of, I forgot what the E4 is, it might have been nuclear power. Yeah, nuclear energy countries. Listen, Africa is at a point right now, you know, you hear NJ Sheila talk about this energy poverty thing. This isn't ethereal and theoretical. It's real. You've mentioned it on this call, where you have nations that are kept out of second world, first world discussions because they don't have an industrial base. And they don't have an industrial base because they don't have sustained power. It's this very linear discussion. And so now we've gotten to a point in the 21st century where there are technologies that can help people exploit their natural resources to create power for themselves and for others. We need to be, particularly the United States, we need to be about the business of making this happen, both from, you know, you talk about instruments of national power, Sheila, diplomatic, information, military, economic. Our E is small. We haven't figured out. I sit on a couple of subcommittees at USX and Bank. I know DFC, they're trying to do great things, you know, post their OPIC days. Guess what? We haven't figured it out as a nation on how to really support U.S. commercial activity overseas. So one of the things that one of my companies tries to do, Alpha Sierra, is set up a platform for the capital markets in the U.S. to come to those markets, really to deploy cash, to get this narrative and this ball rolling about partnering with Africans with best of breed technology so that they can exploit their resources. So I would tell you that the problem isn't as difficult as we think it is. We only make it difficult because the OECD countries, including the United States, are making the narrative wrong. And I would like for us to look at that holistically and try and change it so it's beneficial for all parties.
Well, there's the old Louisiana saying, don't tax him, don't tax me, tax that fellow behind the tree. And, you know, Africa's, you know,
Right, exactly right.
So it's that kind of mentality that that I think we have to break through and understand the unique circumstances in Africa has the greatest amount of energy poverty in the world. And when
right?
It's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking. It's not right. It's just not right in this modern world. It grabs your heart. It's not just your mind. You know, this is not right. We have to do everything we can to help. And I was taken by the Ghanaian minister on China and how China has worked its way into doing what is necessary. And I think for many years we have had that, but the pressures of all the pressures of time, change, politics can take you away from that. And you know, the Churchill book, While England Slept.
Right.
You know, we can't sleep. I mean, we have to stay in the game. We have to help Africa develop its resources in the most safe, positive way possible.
Sheila, can I just make one quick comment?
Sure, Derek.
About what you're saying, and it's to a point I made earlier. The United States, you know, so I'll speak selfishly as a U.S. citizen, as a veteran, you know, Marine colonel. I will tell you, to me, it is beyond plausible and acceptable that the United States should be in a natural resource war, losing in a natural resource war, losing in its ability to create a hegemonic pole position in a continent like Africa, when 80 to 100 million of the citizens of the United States hail from that continent, and the Chinese and the Russians barely have in their populations 1 million people apiece who are of African descent. To me, it's unconscionable. So we've got to figure out a way to take what, like you said, take advantage of our diversity, right, and engage the problem set and engage it now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a perfect opportunity in my humble estimation. But I just see it as particularly as this has evolved in our discussions here. Why not? Why not run with it?
That's right. Absolutely.
And if I could add, maybe one of the ways we can do what Derek so eloquently just said is really get serious about doing exchange programs. One of the things that I wish he had mentioned, Minister Gabriel, that he's doing, and I just have to give this plug, through Equatorial Guinea, is he's established exchange programs with 2 historically Black colleges and universities. We can do this with universities across the board. We can do it with commercial entities. We can do it with retired business executives. But I don't want to get too far away. But Derek's point is right, and we need to do it, not just talk about it.
I agree completely. We have a wealth of people like yourselves who can really change the world, who can help change the world by doing just that and encouraging that. I work primarily in East Africa, but we had a wonderful program where it was a time before the problems arose in Ethiopia, but we had a whole representatives from each of the provinces in Ethiopia in the electric front. Young men came over, fantastic. They went to U.S. utilities. They met with the regulatory agencies, DOE, so on and so forth throughout the country, and utilities and their regulators across the world and across the United States. And it was incredibly valuable. And that is the type of thing we ought to be doing, and vice versa. And it's not just the U.S. It could be European, but I think we have so much to share, and they have so much to share with it. We can learn so much. Why not do more of that, basically? And take a lesson from the Chinese. I mean, they've kind of stepped into our shoes. Where we pulled back, they stepped in. Not their fault. It's the way the world works. I'm very interested, though, in rare earths, rare minerals, and the development of them, and the fact that so many of the rare earths and rare minerals are being mined in Africa, right, but may not be kept in Africa. And I'd say that it's based on studies and the FT articles and all, they say a very significant part of them are in China, directly or indirectly. So can you talk about those rare earth, rare mineral circumstances, and how it is possible for that to be shared to a broader arena?
Jacob, you want to take that one? I have a lot to say about it, but I know you were trying to chomp in.
Well, I thanks. I was gonna see if I could comment and offer perhaps a different frame on the previous discussion. But I don't know if you'd like to just move on, Sheila. I can.
No, why don't you let that evolve a little further with your thoughts, please?
Sure, I appreciate it, because I agree with Colonel Campbell, and I agree that the frame around the United States and other developed economies sort of asserting that because we have a global CO2 problem, that therefore African nations shouldn't have access to energy is it's illogical, it's borderline immoral, and it doesn't make any sense. I think that the better frame, or perhaps the frame that we're testing and seeing if it might work, is that the question that we're trying to ask is a slightly different one, which is the goal is how to provide more access to energy, how to provide more access to economic development.
Yeah.
And are there ways to do that as good, if not better, than the ways that developed economies achieved their economic growth? And I heard an analogy that I thought was somewhat on point, which is the Model T and vehicles from the early 1900s did a good job of moving the United States into a transportation future and providing mobility. But you would never seek to fill your streets with a bunch of Model Ts in this day and age, because the technology is just so much better. And I think that where we are in the discussion on clean energy is we're in this inflection point where we're living through this real transition. And in some areas, not all, but in some areas, and I would say the power sector is one, we now see that there are as good, if not better, alternatives to fossil generation. And so I think that the position of the US government is, it's fine if other countries want to invest in whatever they want to invest in. People have their own, sovereign immunity, they can do that. But what we would like to support is accelerating this transition towards the latest and greatest and most cutting edge technologies, which also happen to be zero emissions, low carbon, clean energy. Now, this isn't true of every single area of technology, and it's not going to be true in every single market. We may see in South Africa, for example, that when you're looking for a tender on power generation, that you can actually compete using solar and storage against thermal. And that's in the open market without any subsidies. But where I just mentioned in Sierra Leone, we may not have the transmission and the infrastructure and everything else in place to provide the same competitive base load reliable electricity using clean energy sources. And so we're going to be supportive of other alternatives. But I think it requires a little bit of added nuance and sort of complexity to recognize that these 54 nations across the continent are each going to have a slightly different experience with that, sort of navigating that inflection point that the globe is navigating together. And that where we want to try to put our thumb on the scale is in situations where we can help push opportunities over the edge, over the bubble, into economic competitiveness, if they exhibit certain attributes that we know are good, because they're clean energy, because they contribute to public health, because they contribute to economic development, et cetera. So I hope that that's clarifying. I don't think that the Biden administration is advocating a view that, because certain forms of energy may not necessarily be clean, that they are per se outlawed or banned or bad. I think it's a slightly more nuanced distinction, I would say. And then I would just say, to transition into the rare earths discussion, I mean, this is one such area where we think that, and we hope that, countries in Africa can play a really central role, because, as I think others have noted in this conversation, we are seeing a dominance of China in the market for what is going to be our future resources, whether that's the production of solar panels or electric vehicle batteries, or even veering into industries where the US has traditionally had a real leadership role, nuclear, for example. And a lot of these industries rely on supply chains of key resources. Sometimes those are rare earth minerals, sometimes they're not so rare, such as polysilicon or nickel or cobalt or lithium. And to the extent that Africa can play a role in helping to develop those resources and provide supply chains for local domestic use and also for export into the global markets, we see that as a great opportunity to partner and to provide resources and to sort of help those industries achieve certain degrees of independence and security that they may not have at the precise moment.
What occurs to me is, should there be more input into United Nations or similar to kind of express the broader view of how we're going to achieve, how we, Africa, working with supporters and friends, how we can achieve this on such a broad basis instead of focusing on one particular aspect. I mean, Africa is like a magnificent smorgasbord of resources and people and cultures. It ought to be a place that it really deserves the best. Ancient history, wonderful cultures, wonderful people. How can we help make that happen?
This is what I fundamentally believe, Sheila, that again, narrative shouldn't be one driven by policymakers. It should be driven by the commercial capital markets. To then, once you see traction with that, then the policymakers will wake up and say, "Oh, let's drive policy to help create this good environment, this productive environment, continue to operate on a grand scale globally." If we wait, I love the UN. I'm a former UN peacekeeper. I'm one of the few guys, Americans, that got to wear a blue helmet. So I have a love for the United Nations. But I can tell you that, again, this is really outside of the realm of policy. I appreciate what people like Jacob are doing at DFC. I really, we roll our sleeves up at XM to try and do the right things, but this has got to be outside of policy and outside of government. The capital markets need to come to bear, particularly when you start looking at rare earths, critical minerals, but really energy transition as a whole, right? As people know, in the capital markets, the world is awash with cash. What needs to happen in Africa is there needs to be a fundamental illumination of project opportunities that are easy to get to, that are clear in terms of how they can be optimized and monetized. And then the capital markets, which always, money seeks returns, will deploy itself, attract the right technologies, or attract the right operators on the ground, and then we can wash, rinse, repeat that process country to country to country. I think if we wait on the UN, other global organizations that are policy driven to get this right, we're going to be waiting a long time. And specific to the United States, I can tell you, U.S. companies usually have some of the same challenges. Hey, what about the promoters I'm dealing with? How do we quality control the project? How do we de-risk it? How do we create security around the project? Some standard themes that come out of U.S. companies wanting to engage. I think those are linear discussions. Those solutions have been solved. We can solve them at a grander scale. People like Minister Gabrielle have looked at how to do things offshore from a maritime perspective. My company focuses in on. One of my companies focuses in on providing that physical, cyber, technical security solutions to de-risk a project. The point is this: if you have all this capital market money that is asking for some basic fundamentals to be taken care of, financial de-risking, how do you qualify a project? You then marry that with people like Jacob at DFC to kind of de-risk the project from a numbers perspective. I think what you'll have is projects that get off the ground quickly, that can show success, and in the capital markets will say, let's repeat that process. Let's work with some of these same folks to get it done over and over again from country to country to country. And then people like Ken can say, hey, you know what? Here's some paradigms from this corporate social responsibility perspective, from the ESG perspective that have worked in the past. Again, let's wash, rinse, repeat that process so that we can get some elan in terms of how to make a project work, how to show success, and then how to repeat it. Does that make sense there, Sheila?
Absolutely. And thank you for your service too, as being a UN peacekeeper. I can't imagine anything more exciting and more scary.
Yeah, well, I was in South Sudan. It was a challenge, but I saw a lot of good and hope in South Sudan. So it was a good
God, yes, absolutely. It's a great place. It really is. And the people are beautiful, great people too. Ken?
Sure. I just want to say one thing here, a few things. This has been a beautiful experience because it presented a lot of dots, this conference today. And, Derek and Jacob and everyone, we're now trying to connect these dots. So the part of the dots that I want to connect to follow on to what Derek just said is that it is an inflection point, and it's a time for investment. It's a time for investment both in the public and private sector, in companies and in individuals that are willing to go on the ground to do the work. One of the things that COVID unfortunately did is it took a lot of folks who would be boots on the ground and put those boots, park them back somewhere else. Now it's a time to get back to the continent and to have the backing to work with a minister like Gabrielle or a minister like Bruno, to work through NJ and the folks that are on this call to implement these projects. I mean, the implementers are there on the ground waiting for us to come. They need the funds, they need the support. And so just critical, concrete things that should happen. We need to get some congressional delegations going over to the continent quickly. We need to talk to the Congressional Black Caucus. We need to talk to other members of Congress.
Absolutely.
We need to get the administration to really draw on the resources and the people that put in power. Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, years of experience on the ground in trade and aid. So I don't know if it's a larger scale session or something where we're all sitting down around a group of tables, but to come up with some concrete actions, but those have to involve investing directly and immediately in projects and people on the continent. The minister laid it out, and all this conference does today is really solidify that point. And if we can't walk away from this with some concrete steps to do that, then we've been ineffective, and I don't think that's going to be the case.
Thank you, Ken. I'm under orders now from Yulissa to hand the mic to her to conduct live Q&A. Yulissa, it's in your lap now. You got to handle it. I don't think that's a problem.
No problem. Thank you so much, Sheila. We unfortunately are running out of time, but thank you so much to all our esteemed speakers. Can everyone hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, before you, if you're about to end, Yulissa, there's one thing that has to be said. I'm sorry, Sheila, but we have to really talk about this issue, and that is, and NJ brings it up most prolifically in speeches I hear with him and places I go with him. This energy poverty in Africa, Sheila, is now a call to action. The United States must do something about it, and we need to do something in an aggressive manner, and we need to bring all of our instruments of national power to bear on it, and we need to do it now. And if we don't, the Russians and the Chinese are addressing the needs in Africa, and as an American entity, or as an American, as a country, the United States rather, we will lose in a market that is begging for our attention. And so we need to act.
Yeah, and I think it's not just the market, but I think the people will lose as well. That's
100%.
That's the most critical.
Yep, 100%.
Yulissa, I think you're about ready to give me the hook here.
Yes, I am. You know, we are at the mercy of technology, but thank you so much to everyone for their patience and their time. We currently have about 5 minutes. We have an influx of questions. I mean, this has been such an impactful conversation and sensitive at the same time. But I'm just going to possibly just pick 2 quick questions from one of our audience members. This is from Frederick. Frederick mentioned that in the previous session, we talked about ground truth and getting real information and assessment information, which can be used to lower risk perceptions. How can the USG do this in a way, I'm guessing he's meaning USA, in this way to encourage investments that will work in Africa, small and medium US businesses? I don't know if perhaps, Ken, you can perhaps quickly, succinctly answer this question. Do you want me to repeat it again?
Unmute. Yeah, it's a great question. I saw it in the box. I think it's simple, is to get boots on the ground. It's been said over and over again. There's so many entities, individuals willing to go and transmit the message, to, as Minister Gabriel said, to do the reports. He said something really important in his first session. He said, forget about even embassy reports about countries right now. Forget about, and I'm sorry, Jacob, if this means reports that US government has done, but you know, a lot has happened in the last 2 years in Africa. So we need to get on the ground to make the assessment, do the reports, and that's the starting point. And that's quick, that's easy, that can be done now. There's no reason to delay. So that's my initial answer, is boots on the ground by willing people to fill those boots.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ken. I would like to conduct this question actually to all the panel speakers. Perhaps each one can do a quick 1 minute run. And I think this question is very applicable to everyone as well. It will serve as a closing statement before we announce the poll results. The question is, what are the practical steps that African nations and businesses can take in order to lead the global energy transition rather than follow the lead of developed countries that have very different priorities? And I think this can be a question that's relative to all the panel discussion speakers, especially perhaps with you, Sheila, as well.
I would tell you, 1, ensure security. 2, make a streamlined approach to the tender process, right? or invite companies who have specific capabilities. You've done your research as an African nation, African parastatal, and go seek a company to give them a direct opportunity because of the technological or business administrative advantage that they bring to the table. And three, get your house in order, right? In other words, make sure that from a FCPA perspective and from a business administration perspective, you have a very lean and collapsed way to do business. The other thing I would tell you is about get your house in order. That third point is also make monies available. Show that you can de-risk a project by putting your own sovereign money into a project. Help that company de-risk its transition to support you from North America or from Europe. Help that small, medium-sized enterprise deal with some of its financial risk. You know, if you do those three things, right, I think that you'll find that there'll be people lining up at the door to come to Africa to partner. So this is what African countries, African partners can do, whether it be countries or companies.
Derek, I would add to that cybersecurity.
Yep.
You have to know that you are cybersecurity protected in this as well as the people in Africa, because the world is at risk in general. And I cannot emphasize that enough. I represented the grid in the blackout of 2003, 2004, when 50 million people don't have power. Bad things happen. It's critical.
That's right. That's part of bullet number one, right? Get the security paradigm in order.
Exactly.
I think Minister Gabriel has tried to do that offshore in the maritime space. Hopefully he's getting some success there. So, I mean, you know, that's all U.S. companies really want to hear. Am I going to be protected? Are my people going to be protected? Are my operations going to be protected? And African business owners in African countries know how to do that. And they've got other partners like us out here who are willing to help them do that, to create that paradigm so people can come and invest and optimize and monetize these opportunities.
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Derek. I'd like to hand over the mic perhaps to Jacob in expanding on what Sheila mentioned around cybersecurity. That's a very interesting take in terms of the technologies perhaps that African nations can incorporate within the energy sector. Perhaps in terms of the renewable energy side, what is the next leap that Africa can take in terms of like competing against the developed countries? Do you mind if we touch upon that?
Sure. And I think, you know, our sense is that this is already happening. These projects are sort of in development all the time. We're about to announce, and I don't want to get ahead of it, but I think it's public at this point, that there's a new solar project coming online in Burundi, which we've worked on. We're working on a number of projects in the southern part of Africa, including in South Africa, which include a storage component. I think somebody had mentioned hydropower in this discussion, and hydro is one of the most sort of underutilized and ubiquitous assets on the continent in terms of both run-of-the-river type hydro projects as well as reservoir-based hydro projects. And now we're seeing innovations where you're seeing sort of key technologies paired with hydro. For example, solar or wind plus hydro to create that battery of dispatchable energy storage that can be a reliable resource and used at any time of the day or night. And also, similarly, we're seeing a lot of proposals for the use of hydro to power production of something like hydrogen. I actually think maybe this is a circuitous route to the answer to your question, which is, it seems to me that hydrogen has just got a tremendous amount of potential to both complement some of the existing infrastructure that we have in the oil and gas space. You know, if you can use existing pipeline infrastructure and even power generation infrastructure and assets to take advantage of zero emissions hydrogen fuel, then you're really cracking a nut that the rest of the world is in huge demand for. And this is a fuel that is going to be critical to our efforts to power all sorts of applications in the power and transportation sectors. But
a lot on that,
generally,
Jacob. We're doing a lot on that in USEA, a tremendous amount. And we're supporting a lot of those efforts domestically, but certainly they can be, and in Africa too, but they can be used in a number of places.
Absolutely.
And I also make one comment on hydro. There's no free lunch when it goes to build a major energy project. It's extremely difficult to get hydro sited. It has repercussions, fisheries, life of the people living around, historical, in the case of Africa, archaeological, multiple issues there. So there's no easy major energy project to be done. There may be little pickings here and there, but to do something big like that is very, very challenging, as you know, I'm sure.
Absolutely. It's basically a sentiment of there's no one shoe that fits all. So Ken, do you mind if you elaborate on that?
Sure. And so you kind of stole something I was going to say. No one size fits all, but I guess if there's a final last word or piece that sums it up for me, I'll say it's a hashtag. And that hashtag is local content. I think all of the things we've been discussing today from both the first panel and the second panel are opportunities to develop the capacity and the skills of the folks in the 54, 55 countries in Africa to do this work. I mean, that's how I came into this. I think that's how we got our experience. And that's the experience that we can offer through various means, through folks on this conference and others to develop the content of citizens of each and every country in Africa to do this work. And I can also tell you that's what the governments want. One of the things that was so clear in doing work with oil companies in Africa over the years is there was always this need to, who's going to do it when you leave? Who's going to take on the training and take on the management? And what I know from my experience through all the jobs that I've done is there are people much better qualified than me to take on all of this work. They just need the opportunity. So the hashtag from this conference for me to follow up on everything we've discussed is local content. And that's something that we all should, could, and must do and support.
Just a note on that very quickly. I tell you, if anybody wants to see local content at its best in Africa, go to Nigerian LNG down in Bonny Island. Go to NLNG. That is a Nigerian run, led, operated, owned project, and it is world class. It rivals anything you would see in the West at the top tier. And so if there is this discussion that it's difficult for Africans to run projects in their own backyard, that is a lie. So I highly encourage U.S. companies to do a little research and surprise themselves about how professional, how from an engineering and operational administrative perspective, Africans can be.
Absolutely. EGLNG is another one. There's so many, and I'm glad you said that.
Yep, absolutely.
There's so much opportunity with so many great people that have so much talent that want to do the right thing. And, it's just time we move on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Let me quickly announce the poll results. I mean, we could go on forever. This is a wide scope topic. It has so many pockets into it. We could literally go on forever. Oh, thank you so much, team, for putting that up. So the first question is, how long will it take for African governments to achieve low carbon economies? The headline is 20 years. That is what the market is saying, that the low carbon for African governments to achieve is 20 years. Running up is 10 to 20 years, and coming third is 10 years. That's very, very interesting. So I'll just give a moment for our team to pull up the second one. Thank you so much, Ida. All right, so which sector within the African clean energy value chain holds the most potential for US involvement? Heading this poll is small-scale renewables. Jacob, I think that's very interesting to you. Followed up by energy storage, and then the trading last is zero carbon technologies. Very, very interesting. If we may have the last one. Thank you so much. So which clean energy solution can best answer Africa's call for electrification? Ooh, it is a tiebreaker here. So heading its way, it's mini and off-grid renewables, followed by gas to power, And then the third is hydrogen production. That's very, very, very interesting. I don't know if perhaps the panelists can just give a few seconds in terms of their commentary, especially within the last poll results before we close.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I wish you would have added small scale nuclear to the last one, because I think that is the one that really will give Africans the leg up from a baseload power perspective. And then gas to power, I really believe if people understood what gas to power meant and how much gas was available on the continent, it would have won out in those three. Gas to power is a logical thing to do, and it's executable, and it's executable now. So, those are last comments from me.
Thank you, Derek. Well, it's been a real privilege to be with you all. Great insights, great perception, great emotion, great dedication. It makes for a beautiful program. I can't thank you enough, and thanks for our audience for hanging in all this time, and look forward to continuing this amazing dialogue. It's really an honor to participate.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you so much to all our privileged speakers. We're really honored to have everyone on board. Just as a quick reminder to all our amazing attendees, thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for the influx of questions. Oh my goodness, we cannot get to all of them. Thank you so much for, voting within the poll results. It really sparked an interesting debate and perhaps something for us to think about and incorporating within the upcoming program, which I'd like to announce right here. The US Africa Energy Summit that will be held in October in Houston, live. Everybody must come. It's from the 4th to the 5th of October. If you're interested in booking a table at the gala dinner, if you're interested in sponsoring a session, if you're interested in speaking opportunities, please do visit our website at www.energycapitalpower.com for more information. We have an amazing and stellar lineup of speakers. We've got ministers on confirmed, we've got presidents confirmed. It's sure to be a good one. If you think this was good, wait until you come to Houston. So with that being said, the recording and the seminar will be shown on the website. It was the recording. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Derek. Thank you so much, audience. Have a lovely day and goodbye.